an umbrella. Oops, there we go. We're being recorded now. Um, uh, that we have been developing for the last maybe year, maybe a little bit more than a year. We've been working through it, and this is how we engage family and how we work with them. But our goal for Kinship is we are trying to connect our kiddos and our parents to family, and whether that's blood related, whether that's adoptive, or what some people call fictive kin or non-related kin, teachers, coaches, neighborhood friend, church family, different stuff like that. That's our goal, is to get our kiddos and our families connected, because we know the research shows and experience shows that when kids are connected and loved consistently by positive adults, that's our number one intervention for trauma. And that's going to be the best thing that's going to help us for getting our kiddos back. So with parents and finding permanency. So Sarah, I don't know if you have just like real shortly want to say anything before I kind of get started on my family finding spiel.
I think the spiel will kind of cover most of it. We have a slideshow for you all, and just kind of going over what he said, kind of family finding, what it's about, what we're trying to do and accomplish, and then some of like brief examples of some of the tools that we're starting to use and with the kids. So it just gives you more of an idea of what we're doing. So I'll go ahead and share my screen with you. You see that?
Yep, we see it. So we are going to talk a little bit about the family finding model. Forgive me if some of this seems a little rushed, because this is a training. This PowerPoint usually takes about 2.5 hours. So we're going to try to get it done a lot quicker so we can have some questions, and because we know we have a little bit less time here today for that, but we'll work through it as best we can and go through there. But like I said, family finding is a model that we've developed, and we've borrowed from Kevin Campbell. He's kind of the founder of this model. He's an expert, worked globally in child welfare, and has kind of worked on this model. But I think one of the most important things when we're talking about a training, or we're talking about new information, especially child welfare, is what's in it for me. Like, why is this important? Is family finding just some like the next trend, or just is it worth my time? And I want to passionately say I think family finding is absolutely worth not only KVC's time, our families, you all as CASA, our community, our courts, our attorneys, our foster parents, our relatives. It's worth everybody having an understanding and buying into it and bringing their heart to the table in this. What it does is it brings hope. We have got, when we talk about family finding and what we're talking about today, a lot of it is geared towards older kids or kids with a lot of needs and trauma behaviors where they struggle with having stable placement. We can't find, either they can't get home and we can't find an adoptive resource. We can't do this or that. How do we connect these kids? How can we have hope for these kids? So family finding brings hope for those kids. It empowers families. So one of the key philosophies of family finding is that the families are the expert on their own healing. Parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, the kids, they need to be brought to the table, and their insight needs to be valued, and they need to be seen for the strengths they bring to the table and not necessarily their weaknesses and what they're lacking, which I'm guilty of, and I know a lot of people in child welfare and across the board, we can be really guilty of looking at our parents or clients from a perspective of, well, they have drug addiction or they don't have a home or this or that, and not focusing on what they have and what can we build on them, how can we grow. It engages families. Like I said, it's about bringing family to the table, letting them be experts, hearing what they have to say, being genuinely curious when our parents have insight into their lives and what's going to work for them, and taking that seriously. Next, it builds lifetime networks. And so it is all about, if you hear nothing else from all of this, just hear that we want to build networks around our kids and around our families. We want them to have support. One thing I have learned, and I'm sure a lot of you have seen in your work with children in care and their parents, and attending court hearings and attending meetings and all of that, is that The big difference between our parents whose children come into care and a lot of us is support. A lot of it is having family that was there for them or taught them well, or could be there, or could babysit when they had to go to work, or could lend them a couple $100 to get a bill when they were going through a rough time, or if they were hurt and couldn't work, somebody that, those type of things, having the support. I got into child welfare thinking I was going to work with evil people, and that's not the case. Very few of the clients we work with are just terrible people who want to hurt children. I'm not saying that's never a thing, and I'm sure some of you guys have seen that, but most people are just hurting people who need support, who need help, who want to grow, want to learn. They love their kids, and they just maybe don't know how to meet the needs at this point in time. And so we want to build those networks around them. We want to use their natural supports. We want to use their family. We want to use their, like I said, their neighbors, their church, whoever. We want to grow those, but we also want to bring in CASA. We want to bring in foster parents. We want KVC, DCF, and some of us to be a very temporary part of that support network. And we want to teach them how to grow that network, how to meet, how to collaborate, how to work, and then move on. And then eventually KVC, DCF, CASA, all of us get the heck out of there and let them live their lives successfully in a way where they don't need any more state intervention. They don't need any more court intervention. Kids can be happy and healthy and move forward, connected with their culture, with their family. First thing to mention, I won't go too much into it, and I don't think I'm probably preaching to the choir here. System's broken. There isn't a single child welfare system in our world, much less Kansas, that's perfect. We have periods of time where we do really well in certain little things, and then something happens and we react and shift and make improvements in another area, and then we lose focus on those previous areas, and we have weaknesses, and that's for all of us. And I think that's, when you're dealing with human beings, that's kind of the case. We're biased, we're flawed, we have weaknesses, we're overworked, we're tired. I mean, you guys all understand that from your roles. There's limitations in resources, and so the system is broken. But there are some things we can control. We kind of cycle. We're impacted by elections. We're impacted by finances, by child deaths, by different things, and we tend to be reactionary. And so we're trying to, a big part of family finding is trying to get out of casework as usual, is trying to get into a space where we're not just doing things because, that's how it's always been done, or that's what's comfortable, or that's what's easy, but we're doing it because that's going to be what's best for the family. And so getting out of some of those things. If you want to go to the next slide. We're calling for a radical change. We want to adopt a framework that's more inclusive, a couple signs of safety and team decision making, which team decision making, signs of safety and team decision makings are two things that DCF has been working on. Signs of safety they've been doing for a few years, looking at safety versus risk in the home, things like that. And then team decision making fits really well in line with this family finding practice, and that what it's about is bringing the family together before any kids are removed or put into foster care, getting that family together, having aunts, uncles, grandparents, neighbors, coaches, pastors, whoever, the kids, if they're old enough and able to do that, together and talking through what's our concern here? Why is DCF involved? Why is maybe the court involved? What can we do to fix it? Can we think of some safety measures we can put in place to address it to where it's not an emergency and we can grow and move forward and not use foster care? That's the first goal. Let's not use foster care if not possible, because there's too many kids in foster care and we use it too often for things. Second goal is if it's determined with the family, with the state, that it's just not going to work, we have to temporarily bring the kids into care. How is that going to work with the family? How can we partner? Do we have an aunt, uncle, grandparent, whoever that can be placed? Do we have an aunt, an uncle, grandparent, coach who can have visits, who can take a kid to therapy, who can take a kid to Sonic periodically, who can keep them connected? We'll do Facebook messages, we'll do phone calls, and do different things. How can we work with the family to make this supportive? Traditionally, our casework is kind of like holding a gun to people's head and saying, do this, this, and this, and then you might get your kids back. And while it's tempting to do that, that's not effective. That's not engaging the family. That's not respecting who they are and where they come from and how they do it. And you're not always going to get great response from that. So we're trying to be in a more inclusive and respectful manner in how we approach our parents and our families and our kiddos. If you want to go to the next slide. So I talked about casework as usual. That's a term we'll probably use a lot in here as we're talking, and something you might think through. Like I said, we're not just wanting to do things because they've always been done that way. We want things to be done because evidence shows that they're going to work, that the research shows that is going to work for these kids, and not just because, well, we've always done it this way, or it's easiest to do it this way. Sometimes we've got to do hard things for the best interest of our children and our parents. We've got to do some hard things. And so we just don't want to be stuck in that casework as usual. And a lot of this training you'll see as I talk is kind of geared towards our caseworkers. I do this training with inside KVC is what I mainly do it with, or with DCF workers. And it's geared towards that perspective. And so I'm not necessarily telling you all, hey, stop doing casework as usual, although it might apply. It might, you might see that I'm asking you guys to broaden your perspective a little bit and be more open to things and stuff like that. But this is really geared, the casework as usual, it's geared toward our case managers, towards kinship workers, aftercare adoption workers, DCF workers, and just not just doing things because it's easy, the easy road, or because we've always done it. Let's go to the next slide. Next slide. There we go. How can I change the way I work? Yeah, we can go to the next slide. Sorry. That's kind of related to the right. And then the next slide. So I won't play that video. There's a video on adverse childhood experiences. Short video, but we got to cut out some things on here, but I'll just kind of explain it. So if you haven't heard of ACEs, it stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences. There's been a lot of research into how these experiences, which range from something as simple as divorce into domestic violence that children are experiencing in the home, drug use by caregivers, separation, criminal activity, lots of different sexual abuse, of course, and lots of different things. And there's a scale, I think it's like 23 questions. I could be way off on that. And you go through and you just check, yep, I've experienced that. No, I've not. I haven't done that. And what they found, the more experiences you had in your childhood, adverse childhood experiences, the more likely that is going to impact your physical health and your mental health, and it's going to impact your outcomes for your life. What really gets to me, I think the mental health is obvious. Yeah, if you've been through bad experiences, if you've been through trauma, yeah, your mental health is probably going to suffer. There's probably going to be, you're going to learn wrong ways to interact with people. You're going to learn wrong ways to look for love or have relationships. You're going to learn bad ways or unhealthy ways to cope. But really gets to me is the physical health. There is a lot of research and a lot of data showing that adverse childhood experiences impact the physical health of children as they grow up. Obesity, heart disease, high blood pressure, lots of different things come into because of the toxic stress. And so I'm sure you guys have heard flight or fight, flight, fight, run, or flight, fight, freeze. And so your brain, as you go through trauma, that's a natural response. Stress in and of itself isn't bad. There's good stress. There's stress of a new day, your first job, first day at your new job, and you're stressed and you want to do well. And so maybe you get up early and you prepare and you do some research or this or that. That's good stress. That's how we grow. None of us grow without stress. None of us at our job would grow if we didn't have difficult situations. We wouldn't grow in life if we didn't have challenging situations. That's not a bad thing. And so our body kind of reacts to that. You get a jolt of adrenaline. You get some different things, and your brain's functioning in a different way. You can't. There's a lot of research into, and I would recommend neurosequential theory by Dr. Perry. If you're just interested and want to hear more, but he talks a lot about when we are in that fight or flight mode, we cannot process information at the same level that we would when we're in the calm of the storm, when things are going well, when we have the resources we need. And so we make very quick decisions. We're surviving. We're not doing all that. And so our kids, over and over, from having toxic stress, from having adrenaline and having these different brain chemicals flooding their brain and their body out of this trauma that they're experiencing, their brain gets used to that and they are in this mode all the time. Some of our kids, if you've ever fostered or even just had some conversations with some of our kids with a lot of trauma reactions and behaviors, you'll notice that they are wired to see danger in every situation. And part of that's because of, or not part of that, that's because of the abuse they've been through or the uncertainty they've been through in their life. And so they can interpret very safe, normal, healthy situations as dangerous. Sometimes we'll have foster parents be like, we're loving the kid and we're providing them food, this or that, but they're still, acting up or doing this or that. It's because they're not used to it. It takes time to learn those new functions and get those new cycles in. And so that toxic stress that floods our brains really impacts us. And so children in foster care, American children foster care, have the worst physical and mental health status than any group of disadvantaged children. Foster care itself adds its own burden of distress and disease to children. And so I think that's important to know. Our kids are suffering. And the kids I'm thinking about, I'm not necessarily thinking about all of our kids in care, although it could be all of them. I'm thinking about the kids who don't have stability, who don't have people who are consistently showing love, who are kind of languishing in care, who are lonely. Loneliness is devastating and kills us as human beings. And so, the American Academy of Pediatrics has, research into children in foster care and how poorly their outcomes are as they turn into adults because of that disconnect, because of that isolation from family or anybody who cares about them. And so that's the real negative part of this. That's everything's terrible. But here's the positive thing. There is hope. Science shows that children who do well despite serious hardship have had at least one stable and committed relationship with a supportive adult. These relationships buffer children from developmental disruption and help them develop resilience or the set of skills needed to respond to adversity and thrive. And that's from Harvard, obviously much smarter than I am. But it's important to know there's hope. There's an intervention. There's things we can do, and it seems simple, but that intervention is connection. That's adults that care about these kids who are going to put up with the hard stuff, who are going to be consistent in the muck and the mire of that trauma and those reactions and the needs that children are showing through hard behaviors. And I think this quote from Dr. Perry, Bruce Perry on the site is really important. I'll read that real quick. The more healthy relationships a child has, the more likely he will be to recover from trauma and thrive. Relationships are the agents of change, and the most powerful therapy is human love. And so I don't know, that kind of hits me in the feelings whenever I think through that or I read that, because it seems silly. And I always like to note in this, it's not like, hey, I'm just going to go hug this kid and their trauma is going to go away and man, we fixed everything and it's just awesome. That's love isn't a feeling. It's not an emotion. It's a commitment and it's a decision to someone. Like, I am committed and I am going to be there through hard times. I am going to be that calm in the storm. I'm going to be that secure base for this child as they try to fill out the world and they make mistakes and they do bad things and they do good things and they do hard things and they do easy things. I'm going to be consistent, and eventually that child is going to grow and that child is going to heal. May not be today, it's not going to be today. It's not going to be the next week or the next month, might not even be the next 10 years, but it's really important for our kids developmentally as they grow into adults and they become citizens to have some sort of connection and secure base with adults. So that transitions us into the core beliefs of family finding and what family finding is. And they're pretty simple. None of this is going to be mind-blowing. None of this is going to just knock you off your socks. But the first one is every young person has an immediate and extended family, and they can be found if we try. And so it seems simple and it seems obvious. Well, everybody's got family. But in the work we do, we don't always work that way. We don't have hope or we don't have faith that there's family. And so, we've called grandma or we've called aunt or uncle and it's not going to work. Or, there's history of drug use in this family. So we just, we're not going to work on it. All of us have family who's awful, who's terrible, who's dangerous. We have family who's amazing, wonderful. And we have family who's kind of in between, just average. So. It's important to know all of our kids, they're the same. Whoops. Sorry, I'm back. Can you guys hear me? Okay. I got like a phone call. I'm on my phone while I'm doing it. I got a spam phone call while I was doing this. And so it's important that we look and we not give up and we leave no stone unturned. And we don't just judge family by, parents, my grandparents, this or that, that we work hard to keep kiddos connected, whether that's placement or whether that's just connection, whether that's just visits or phone calls, or like I said, letters or different things like that. The second one is loneliness can be devastating, even dangerous, and is experienced by most children and youth in the care system. And so kind of like I had hinted at, loneliness is killing some of our youth, and it's urgent. All of our kids in foster care experience some level of loneliness, but we'll go more into it. But some of our kids that I think through when I do this training are experiencing severe levels of loneliness, and that is devastating their brain chemistry. It's devastating how they feel about themselves, how they feel about what they do, what they know, who they know, and what others feel about them. And so it's important that we find it urgent and that we make changes to help them, even when it's hard. The third one is a permanent, meaningful connection to family and caring adults helps the youth to develop a sense of belonging and hope. And so that's how you combat loneliness. Get these kids connected with people who care about them. It's not always simple. Sometimes it's hard. Sometimes you got to work around things. You've got to put services in place for those family members. You've got to do things that are hard, but it's worth it for these kids. And the last one, the single factor most closely associated with positive outcomes for young people, is a meaningful lifelong connection to family and community support. And so in this, we talk a lot about family, but when I talk about family, family isn't just limited to blood. Like I've said, it's not limited to adoption. It's not limited to, it could be foster parents. It could be church family. It could be someone my dad goes to Quick Trip, goes to the gas station every morning and gets to know people in his hometown. Like some of those people are like family to my dad at this point. And so we can be creative, and it can be different avenues. Let's go to the next slide. Hopefully I'm not talking too much, because I do that. Changing our beliefs. This is an activity, and we won't go into it because we don't have time, but here, will you go back? I want to go over just a few of them real quick, just so people get like the mindset of what we're doing. We want to change our beliefs. And so below are some statements that people say, that people communicate in the work they do, and we want to change them. And so I'm going to go through some of them and kind of give you an example of how we want to reframe that from a family finding mindset, from an inclusive and engaged mindset. And so the first one is they have no one. I hear professionals say that all the time. I hear attorneys, judges, social workers. I hear CASA. I hear foster parents. I hear the kids. I hear families say that. And just like we talked about, that's not true. There's no kid. There's no person who has no one in the world that loves them or could love them. There's people for every kid, and I have that hope, and we need to all have that hope, and we need to work for it. Second one is there's no father. Again, not true. They're impossible. That's, it's called a biological certainty that everybody has a father and a mother, and that father and mothers have father and mother, and so on and so forth. There's family. If we look and we try, and we go hard at it, and we are creative, there's family somewhere. The next one is relatives are all addicted, troubled, and violent. I've hinted at that. Often we get into a mindset of, well, this family's got a history. Mom and grandma are doing drugs, and blah, blah, blah. And so we give up. Family's not appropriate, moving forward. And that's not okay. That's not acceptable. We need to push, and we need to look, and we need to find. And so we need to talk to those addicted family and get information. All right, maybe you're on the place to be a great connection or involved in this kid's life, or maybe you are just for a safe manner. We can step in. Who do you know that could be? Do you have family? Do you have friends? Do you have folks who care about this kid, or do care about this kid, or this kid cares about them? Next one, they are too poor from too far away. Poverty one is a big one for us, guys. We are all biased, and whether we see it or not, bias is kind of inherently something blindly we don't always see. We sometimes are biased against poverty. Judging family based on, they don't have enough space, or they don't have the resources, they don't make enough money, or this or that. Poverty is an abuse. Poverty isn't a neglect. Poverty is not showing that you don't love someone. Poverty is a cycle, and it's insanely hard to get out of. So we need to engage our families and help them with that. But because not having space, not very often should be a reason for keeping kids away from family. There are scenarios like if there's health issues that aren't going to work, or this or that. I understand, but we should not be using poverty as an excuse to isolate kids from their family. That's not. And if you're ever in any staffing or anything with me, I will pipe in and say that and communicate that. And You may or may not agree, and it'll be a fun conversation, and we'll do our best to get to a place where we understand each other. But I'm very adamant poverty is not abuse. Kids should not be coming in care because of poverty. If there's danger surrounding some of those things, and we need to temporarily do things, then sure, of course. But just simply not having, having a 2-bedroom apartment, 5 kids, that's not a reason for kids coming into custody or not be with a relative on that. Next one, youth are too mentally ill or disabled to be cared for or about. I'm telling you guys, I've been guilty of this, and I feel ashamed. I mean, there's definitely some kids where you feel this sometimes. I'm never going to find someone. There's not going to be a foster home. There's not going to be a relative. There's not going to be anyone who's going to be able to meet their needs or consistently be there for this kid. And we've got to shake that habit, and we've got to not give up hope. And we've got to, again, no stone unturned, and find these people on that. But that's kind of the mindset we're trying to move forward from in these. Get away from some of our old thoughts and be more creative and not give up on these kids and families. All right, we can go into the next one. Family finding model steps. And so family finding has 3 different areas to it. And sorry, I'm going through my notes to kind of see where the next, so I don't overshare. Okay. The first part is alignment. So really that's about aligning with the family. Alignment and engagement are pretty similar. Aligning with the family, engaging with that family. Like I said, bringing them to the table, being openly curious, being genuine with the family, and then healing and development. That's working with the family. Like, all right, we're trying to get on the same page. We're trying to understand each other, but now what are we doing? What work are we putting in? What plan are we making? What can we do? And I think Sarah's going to go over. Are you on the next one, Sarah, or am I still going for a few? No, I'm in the next one. Okay, go to the next one. Just tell me when you're jumping in. I forgot where we're at. Statement of meeting concerns. All right. So a big piece of what we're doing when we're engaging and aligning with families is we are trying to develop a statement for these kids. And so what is the biggest unmet need for this child? Most of that is going to be related to consistency, to love, to like what I've talked about in that Bruce Perry quote and some of the research we've discussed already, and that how are we going to get this child connected with stable, permanent love with adults who care about them. And that can be different every scenario. If we have a kid who's struggling to stay put, like maybe they have placement, they have somebody who cares and love with them, but maybe they're struggling in school and being kicked out of school or this or that. So the statement might be something like, Johnny needs an educational environment that will cater to his individual needs, be patient, and work with him as he tries to grow and develop in this world, or something like that. And so we try to find a statement of need, what the concern is, what the problem is, as a group with the support network that we develop. And then we discuss what's the intervention. What are we going to do to meet this need? How are we going to do this? Where does the youth fit into it? Is the kid 17 years old, pretty bright? Are they able to be in there with us? Can they be in there in the trenches communicating, here's what I need, or here's what I want, or here's my goals? Can they do that? Some kids are like, we have some kids that can do that. Or are they going to be on the side where, yeah, they're involved and we get information, but maybe they're going to work more alongside us and not take the lead on it? Or are they going to be kind of behind us? Or are they not developmentally or emotionally there where they can really be involved in this piece, and we just are going to need to kind of take over some things as professionals, adults in their lives, and kind of bring them up to speed and into what they can handle development in that moment? We have to decide that and communicate that. So what if we do nothing? A big part of this is, so what if we do nothing for this kid? The next 5 years, what is going to happen to this kid? And so the kids I'm talking about dealing with, a lot of likely outcomes, and we'll ask family this, we'll ask their support network, why? Like what's going to happen in 5 years if we do nothing? And a lot of times, jail, pregnant, which isn't, always a bad thing, but can be, using drugs, who knows, in unhealthy relationships, homeless, things like that. And kind of get a sense of, why are we here? Like, why is it important that we do something urgently for this child and for this family? And then we discuss who's going to attend a network meeting. So family funding is all about building these support networks and having ongoing meetings with them. And so who's going to be in that? So we'll ask the kid, like, who do you love? Who cares about you? We'll ask parents the same question. We'll interview people. We have different tools that we'll kind of go into. Sarah will go into that we use to approach kiddos and parents as we do this, but we want to get a network of unpaid professional, or sorry, not professionals, unpaid individuals, people who are there because they love the family and not because they're paid to be there. For a while, KVC, DCF, CASA, whoever will be there. But we want eventually for us to get out of there because it's not healthy for us to be there for their whole lives. We want to move on. So we can go on to the next slide, family seeing. And so I've hinted a little bit about this, but family seeing is about seeing this family for their strengths, for genuinely caring about who they are and what they bring to the table. Questions like we kind of discussed, there's the 3 questions when we just talk with family, we're interviewing them, trying to build connections, is who loves this child? Like, who cares about them? Who would come to a birthday party if you were to throw one? Who would call them on their birthday? Who would, go to a graduation or this or that? Who might love this child? So maybe there's some folks who, they don't have a lot of a connection or relationship this time, but could we develop one? Is there somebody in there that's been in their life just kind of on the outside? It's kind of knows them, kind of not, that we could work, teachers, a lot of times it's teachers, we'll call teachers when we get kids, and if we don't have family and this or that, we'll call schools and say, all right, who's ready to develop a relationship, with a kid that's been in your class, or, with the administrator, that secretary or that principal or whatever, and who might love this child, who could learn to love this child. This challenge will ask these questions, and we try to develop this and get individuals involved in that child's life. Next slide. Maybe. And so here's kind of a graphic example of what this network could potentially look like. You see in the middle, it's real small on my phone, but you see the vulnerable children. And so in the middle is that child. And then you've got the next kind of ring around them is family, parents, aunt, uncle, grandparent, cousins, or in family friends, and then outside that, maybe you got community members, you've got, neighbors, you've got people who, it says in their village social worker, says in there, there's a senior social worker who's kind of a little bit outside of that. There's community members, there's coaches, there's different people who's been involved in the family's life that might be in there. And then you keep going out, and then it services, maybe there's mental health services in there, therapists, maybe there's CDDO services, maybe there's housing services, other poverty services, there's DCF, there's KVC, there's all of that. And so we want to build that network. There's different layers, but we want to utilize everyone we can who can touch this family and help them and to heal and grow and move forward and find permanency, and look back at foster care as just a learning experience and a memory that we are going to move past on that. All right, we'll go to the next. So this is kind of just another slide talking about the different things. And so this is, in Kinship with me and Sarah and her team, when we get kiddos in care, these are the people we look at. Of course, initially you're looking at immediate family, you're looking at extended family, but then you'll go into like long lost relatives, unknown family, estranged family members. Sometimes estranged family members are the best options. People who are a bit more removed that we know are going to have really good boundaries and are not, they can be connected to the family, but maybe not too connected to where kids are in danger or whatever. And then you kind of get into the community, cultural connections. And so maybe not somebody who is intimately connected to the family, but if like the kiddo's tribal or the family's tribal, maybe there's some tribal connections, or if there's the kiddo is the family practices Islam, maybe there's people at a mosque who can kind of culturally connect that child, and it's not family, but it's something that can keep them connected with who they are and where they come from and their origin. Faith-based connections, kind of like, church, youth groups, Sunday school, recreational. So some of our teens and stuff, we've had kids. I think of a girl in Johnson County that was traveled and did basketball, and her coach was her placement, and that was wonderful, and that was great. And again, we're not even just talking about placement, we're talking about connection. So how can these people be connected? Not even just placement. School teachers, friends, close colleagues, employment. That's more for parents. I don't think our teenagers our kids are gonna have a lot of colleagues, but do they have have people in their lives that could be a support. Previous foster, I can't tell you, some of these foster parents turn into family really quickly for our kids and are a big support. And sometimes they're the only ones who care. And I can't tell you how many times we go back and we say, all right, you had this kiddo for a long time and you're connected and you still talk to him through Facebook and stuff like that. We need you on our team. We need you in this network. We need you. And maybe placement doesn't work for a very good reason, but we need you a part of this family and this team. Moving on. Oh yeah, I was way off on when you were coming in, Sarah. To truce activity, and so this, I want you guys to think in child welfare, and I know you guys have experienced this. We come in a lot of situations that are really difficult, that are just really hard to manage and think through. And example I have in here is a mother continues to abuse alcohol and cannot remain sober for more than a week at a time, causes her to struggle to maintain housing in a safe, stable environment for her daughter. That same mother loves her daughter dearly and can provide support when sober. The daughter expresses a strong devotion to her mother and often worries about her also. And so the two things I want you to think about is, should the mother be allowed contact with her daughter and vice versa? And can support be provided to the child even if she is not living with her mother full time? And so we have these situations where it's just not working for children to be back with their parents. That may have been the goal and it's just not working out. But do we need to completely isolate these kids? When kids are teens and they know their parents and they've developed with them, is taking that parent out of the equation really going to help them in the long term? I think experience, I think research, I think evidence shows it's not. That parent relationship, even if it was abusive or neglectful, is really important, and it's developmentally connected to that child's story. And if we remove that and isolate that completely, we are not going to be doing well for them as they transition into adults. And so it's not necessarily saying, hey, send that kiddo home to that mother who's abusing alcohol and can't meet her needs, but how can she stay connected? Is there ways that we can make, when she's sober and we know she's sober, that we can keep them connected, that they can have some visitation, whether it's supervised or not, or write letters or do a FaceTime or whatever, and still be a part of their lives? And so this graphic to this side, I think, is really useful. And it's important, not even just for child welfare, but politically, religiously, for a lot of things in the world. This, yes, we can feel grateful and we can be disappointed about things. Yes, we can enjoy extra time with loved ones and feel overwhelmed by their presence, which I know some of you guys probably feel that, and I feel that. Yes, we can be hopeful and also feel like everything is falling apart. Yes, we can be a source of support to others, but also we can prioritize our needs and fill our own cup. And so those two truths can be true at the same time, even though they seem like they might conflict with each other or be mutually exclusive. And so there can be really awful things going on in the lives of parents or caregivers for kids. They also can play a really important role and be a key to healthy development and healing for our kiddos. And so we don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater. We want to protect the kids and put things in place to keep them safe, but we want to be able to utilize what we can from our family so that kids can be nurtured, so they can know their culture, they can have their connection, they know their identity, because that becomes really important as you grow into a young adult and you find your identity. You need to be able to know those things, and they're going to find it one way or another. I don't know if any social worker or anybody's told you this, or maybe you've said to this yourself. Our kids or teenagers are going to find their parents eventually when they age out. Sometimes it's that day they turn 18 and they request out, they're going back to parents. And so we want to do what we can in the meantime to while we have any control, to put things in place to make it healthy as possible, so that it's not just a blind, kids have been in foster care for 3 years, not seeing parents, and then they go out, blindly reconnecting, and that can be a really bad situation. So moving on. Oh, sorry. I had a thing pop up asking me if I wanted to mute or not. Sorry if I get distracted. So connections versus safety and risk, a big part of what we do, and maybe you've heard us talk through this, is we want to look at when we're connecting people, are the concerns we have with those people, is it a pretty big safety concern and an immediate safety concern, or is it a risk? Is it something that if they're there in connection with that person or having communication that they're going to be harmed right now, definitely? Or is it something that we could put measures in place to monitor and keep them safe? And so we want to look at that. And so, like I said, uncle who's actively using meth or, you know, and the criminal activities, waving around a gun on Facebook, blah, blah, probably not someone we're going to send our teenager over for an overnight visit. But could we find some way to have letters or pictures? Because that uncle may have a lot of bad things going on with them, but they still may be really important to our kiddo. They still might hold a really big piece and key to that kiddo's healing. They might have some information on other folks or other things that might help this kiddo. We don't want to throw that out. We don't want to isolate that. We want to keep that connection, but we want to keep it safe. We don't want to just blindly go in and say, all right, let's FaceTime. We don't know, we don't know how it's going to go, and just FaceTime and leave that opportunity for hurt in there. But we also don't want to completely isolate kiddos from their family because of crappy decisions by adults. We want to find ways to get in there. And so what are we worried about? We have to identify, what are we worried about? But what's working well? What does this person bring to the table? How could we utilize them? And what needs to change? Can we put some things in place? Is there something the social workers can do? Is there something that uncle can do? Is there something CASA can do to help facilitate, or someone else in the team that can help facilitate and keep these people connected in a safe way, in a way that's going to promote growth and combat that loneliness, that's going to help the mental health, the physical outcomes of our kiddos. And so there's examples in here of staying connected. We've kind of talked about letters, pictures, phone calls, FaceTime, attending events, other appointments and stuff like that. But I think, is this where you take over, Sarah? All right, Sarah's going to take over and talk about our specific tools we've been utilizing for family finding.
What Evan said. So I'm just kind of going to briefly summarize some of the tools that we've been using to help build connections for our kiddos. So here's kind of a list, and we'll go to the first one. So engagement, we start this the day of referral, or as soon as we get a heads up that a kiddo is coming into care. We get a hold of the parents, any family that DCF has provided for us. And then we start asking them, okay, first, yes, we are looking for placement, but we're expanding on that, and not just placement, but connection. Like, okay, you say you can't be placement, we understand, but would you be able to commit to staying in this child's life? Could we, once we find placement, would you be willing to do visits, or take them out to eat, or send them letters, do phone calls, go to their activities, take them to therapy, any and all those things. So that's part of this engagement that we're really trying to expand upon, because before it was as soon as kids came into care, it's like, okay, we're trying to find placement. Okay, you say no, and we move on, and it's hard to come back to those relatives, and they just kind of get shut down, and then they don't know who to contact, and it just gets a little chaotic. So we're really trying to work and expand on that, and just building this lifetime network for these kids. So it doesn't matter how many relatives they have, how many coaches or whatever, like, we want them all to be a part of these kids' lives and this family, just to build this support system. So kind of branching off of that, the discovery work that we do, some of it, we have a database, we help run searches on parents or relatives. Obviously, as much information as we know about them will help, narrow down our search. And we'll send letters if we don't necessarily know who these people are in association to the case, to just say, hey, we have this kiddo, in a sense, more or less like, do they belong to you? Do you know them? And we try and get a hold of them. If we have phone numbers, we're calling them. If we have an address, we're sending them a letter in the mail. Every few months, we try and follow up, and we'll do the whole process all over again, just to try and stay in touch. We're talking with the case team, seeing if when they talk with the kiddos or anything, if anybody discloses any information, then we're digging into them. We'll do Facebook searches. We, as morbid as it is, we look at obituaries, because family who is left in this world are listed there. So that can help us broaden our searches as well. So the first one is kind of the family tree. You can make it real pretty and all social work like and do the genogram as well. But we're looking for, names, the relationship they have. Are they adoptive family? Are they half siblings, step siblings, step parents? Any of all those people are relatives. A step parent is also a relative. Their family, their grandparents are relatives to these kids. Even an ex who was related through marriage but is no longer associated necessarily is a relative. We're going to try and look at like how well the kiddos and youth get along with these people. Do they know them? Is it something we have to be a little careful with, like introducing? I see more of it getting a little more complicated when we have kids who have already been adopted come into custody, and then we're trying to potentially find bio family or touch base and see where they're at, and just depends on what's happening in the adoptive family's life when the kid comes in as well. The generational patterns, a lot of our kids that come in, their parents were in custody too. So I think building on this lifetime network, we're hoping that over time we see less and less of that these kids build those connections as they get older. And so that's what Evan said. The biggest thing that we see is the difference between our clients and ourselves is support. If we can build that while they're in care and they can keep growing and building that, then in theory, we would see less kids have their own kids come into care. So the connectedness map is one of the tools that we use. We can do it with parents. I see this particular one being a little more useful with parents. Who are your supports? How are you connected to them? They could have, like Evan said, like his dad makes connections with people in his town, like just going to the store. So they could be your hairdresser. They could be community members, not necessarily just family. Just basically who's going to come and sit at you at this table to support you. And that's what we want to know. There you go. Mobility mapping is one we've been really using a lot of. I don't think this one's got a video on it, but you'll hear either connections or the connections tool or mobility mapping is a lot of the terms our workers are starting to use a little bit more. And mobility mapping will go to the kid who potentially doesn't have, they're not in a relative placement. Maybe they've been kind of bouncing around a little bit. They're harder to place, the quote, they don't have anybody. We're going to try and use this tool to dive deeper. So we start by asking like the kids, where did you live? Like, what's the first house that you remember from your childhood? Who lived with you? Do you remember where it was? What school did you go to? Who were your neighbors at that time? Because one of the fun things about this tool, and they draw pictures, sometimes it's easier just to draw it out, which is kind of what this example is showing you and stuff. It just, the whole mobility map is we're moving with the kid throughout their life, trying to identify any type of supports these people, these kids have had throughout the duration before they came into care. If they've been in care for a while, maybe it ends up showing us previous foster homes or inner kins that they haven't seen or heard from for a while. So it gives us an opportunity to reach out or try and find these people. Teachers, classmates, sometimes it's trying to track down a classmate to get a hold of their parents. So it's it can turn into a lot of detective work. So I think sometimes this is where like CASA could kind of help us too, if we can just build a team, and you guys are really great at getting like school records and talking to those people. So that would be a huge benefit for KVC, I think, and just creating more of a teamwork kind of thing and getting as much information as we can, because sometimes we do get a little pushback from the school, and it's kind of funky trying to call the school. We don't necessarily know what kind of release you need to be like, hey, we're trying to find this person's parents, but they haven't gone to school here for like 2 years. So it is kind of, interesting to go that route. So as much help as, we can, everyone wants to chime in.
Yeah, I was gonna say, sorry, I didn't know you could stay unmuted. So I would say mobility mapping, it can be a real formal, like, all right, let's put pieces of paper on the wall, draw a picture, do all that. It can do that, or it can just be conversation. And I say a lot of you, if you have kids who are struggling with connections, you can do this. And I would encourage you, don't have time today, but if you're interested in kind of how to have that conversation and do that, you can go on YouTube and you can just search mobility map. And this video will pop up and a few others. Like this video is it her doing an example of like Louis Armstrong and like having obviously a fake conversation with him and what it would look like. But then there's an example of Kevin Campbell. He has a video on YouTube of him doing it with a youth in like, I can't, like Wyoming or something like that. And it's a couple videos and I think it's a couple hours long, but he actually does it with him and it shows. And you can see kind of the format and what it looks like and how to do that. And I know a lot of you do a really good job of having good relationships with your kids, and might be able to do that if your kids are a little bit older and can communicate, and do that. And that might be helpful if you ever have interest when you're meeting with them. You know what? I'm just gonna have a quick conversation about what connections they might have or what they remember about their life and see if there's some people that we can get involved to support this kiddo. All right, I'll shut up. Sorry, Sarah.
All good. All right. My clicker is a little slow now that I'm on the video. So family meetings, you may have heard this term floating around already. So we're trying to get that Lifetime network to sit around the table to join forces to see how can we help this kid, what can we do? And then eventually, like Evan had said, we want the family to take that over. So we can start by having these family meetings to get everybody to kind of commit. Where's everybody at right now? Where's the kid at, like emotionally and physically, depending upon where they're located. And just kind of build and talk on what the goals are. Like, what's this child's unmet need, their biggest unmet need? A lot of times it's unconditional love. Well, how can we show this child love? Through consistency is one of the biggest things. Like, they need to know what to expect with their family, especially if it's a newer member of their family or their support team or whatever that's kind of come back into their lives. We don't want them to leave again. So how can we get you to stay in this child's life? So having this meeting with the case team, with CASA, with the individuals involved, sometimes the kid initially, sometimes we wait till the second meeting to pull the kid in. It just really depends on the situation. But we're really trying to have more and more of these family meetings to get everybody on the same page so we can continue to build those networks for them. And then one of the things we can do at those meetings is calendaring. So literally taking a calendar and blocking in time. So we want to see how busy this child is regularly in their placement. If are they in therapy, we want that written down. If we know like it's a consistent time, if they're in sports, if they're not. One of the things that we've learned through like Kevin Campbell's trainings and all that is if you compare a child in foster care's calendar to a child who's not in foster care, which is kind of what this is showing. This is a child in care, and this is, oops, sorry, I clicked on it. And this is a child not involved in care. This child is so much busier and their calendar is so full. This child has a lot of empty space. Can you, I don't know if you can see my mouse. Can you not see my mouse? Okay, well, the child on the right is in care and the child on the left is not in care. And so the child on the left is much busier. Their lives appear to be a little more full. So we're trying to basically fill in the kid in care's calendar by getting the family in Lifetime Network to commit to kind of help fill that up. So whether that's taking them to basketball every other week, maybe that's a family game night, maybe that's we're going to go to the movies and we're going to have dinner once a month, and just really trying to build on that. So you might see people sending out calendars, like physical calendars to people just to try and fill that up. We can talk about that during the family meetings as well. So that's another tool that we use. And I also want to touch on the dosing that's mentioned here down below. Some of our kiddos, like they've had some really rough lives. They have unhealthy relationships and they essentially don't know what healthy love is. So sometimes by doing too much too soon, we can scare these kids away and they back off, and then they reject any attempts to try and rebuild those connections. So that's why you might see, like, okay, we found this relative, but we don't move the kid right away. Like, we need to rebuild that relationship. So we're going to start by dosing them. Let's go to dinner. Let's go have this visit once a week. Okay, now we're going to build it up to 2 hours, or, 4 hours, 5 hours, one overnight, and then the weekend. And then we move the kid. Kind of that term you might hear too is just the dosing of family and connections with the kids. So then again, with the Lifetime Network, just kind of wrapping up here, just the natural supports as much as we can. We just want to, dose these kids and surround these kids with these people who are going to be there for potentially their whole lives, and show them that they're loved and supported and cared about. And hopefully then the, professionals can kind of ease out of their lives. So I don't know, at this point, that's the end of our slideshow. If Heather, we want to stop for questions if we have time for that.
I think we do have time for that. If people can pop off if they need to, but maybe 10 or 15 minutes if there's questions. Any volunteers want to unmute and ask a question?
So yeah, I have a question. It's Rich. So as this is, I see this is your statewide team, and then Sarah, you're in Douglas County?
Yeah, I'm in Douglas County and Johnson County.
And so when we get cases at the CRB, do we, should we expect that some of the cases or all of the cases will be adopting this approach as they work with kids and families, or is it just sort of catch as catch can? Some may not. I mean, how's this unrolling?
So it's yeah, I don't think it's feasibly at this. My dream is every kid will have this. I think that would be absolutely wonderful, but I don't think we can start that way. And so we're really targeting those kids that really need it, because we've got some kids in care who, either they have stable relative placement, their, parents are doing well, kids are going to go home, or they have stable foster placement. They're really connected and they have that, and they have what they need, and it doesn't feel so much like foster care. But then we have these other kids who placement to placement to placement, who don't have an adoptive resource, or the parents aren't doing so well. And so those are the kids we're really looking at to focus that on. I do want this, as I'm training case managers and I'm training everybody on it, I want it to become just a part of the work we do, and natural outflowing of that is, hey, there's an issue on this case. Let's get a family meeting together. Let's get CASA involved. Let's get whoever loves this kid, whoever cares about this kid, let's just get together and let's talk through it on that. But yeah, you probably wouldn't see it on every kid you ever have, but please feel free to. I want to put it out there. If you all have a kid that you have concerns about and you feel like might benefit from some of this, bring it to our attention. We've got a lot of kids that we work on this or that sometimes we need help like identifying, because we're working on other stuff. And if you say, hey, little Johnny is really struggling. I met with him last week and he's just not feeling good about himself. He doesn't really, feel loved or this or that. Let us know. Let's get together. Let's rally the troops. Let's try to come up with a plan so that we can intervene and we can provide some dosing, like Sarah said, some positive experiences for this kid. Because it doesn't take grand, huge gestures to help kids heal. It can take a lot of just doses. I don't know about you guys. I've had a boss once that wrote me a letter, left it on my desk, just like a couple positive sentences encouraging. Changed my life. It seems stupid, but just changed my life, especially for that week, that month, that, and really helped me feel good and shed some light on some positive things and help me keep going. And so if we can just get little things, little Facebook messages, little interactions, one thing I didn't even bring up, but if I was a kid in care, I've always thought, I just want somebody to play catch with me, baseball. Let's get a mitt, let's get a baseball. Let's just play catch for 30 minutes and talk about life and do all that. But to answer your question, no, it wouldn't be on every kid at this point. eventually, yes, let's do it. Every kid, let's do that. But right now, I think we're kind of focusing on the kids that we just have failed, honestly, that are languishing in the system, that are not getting what they need.
Evan, this is Heather. Would the volunteers and I see some indication that Kinship was involved if there was someone attending a case plan document? We might see their name listed as participating. What other signs would we look for? So that
Signs?
yeah, document.
I can answer that one, Evan. So
Okay.
case plan invites, like you might see their name, especially if they're in a relative placement. The Lawrence workers really try to attend all of those. You might also see them on the journal entries for attending court. And then I'm trying to get them to start working on added like court reports with relative information and connections, who they've contacted, what that looks like. So you might see that thrown into the case manager's court report a little more thoroughly.
Great, thank you for that.
And then I saw Jill's been raising her hand, so.
Actually, Evan covered a lot of what was on my mind, but I'm thinking that it might be possible, particularly if you can indicate to CASA and CRB which kids you've already sort of identified as being part of this family finding process. I wonder if there would be a way to develop systematic feedback from CASA and from CRB with regard to our ideas, thoughts about, based on our interaction with the children, our thoughts on who would be good resources and the kind of relationships that exist that would help with this process.
Yeah, no, I think absolutely. I think, and a part of this for me is getting to know you guys getting to know us so that you know who we are, who you can contact and reach out to. We do, as far as like feedback on specific family finding stuff, we did have an intern who developed a survey that we can send out as we do this process. And if you're ever involved in part of like family meeting or any part of the family finding, we can send that out so you can give some specific people like, hey, I like this. Hey, this was kind of awkward. I didn't like, or it didn't feel like it worked. And that kind of helps us develop. But then again, I'm also just open for emails or phone calls. Hey, Evan, Sarah, I've got this kid. I really think this person would be a great connection, or can we look into this? We're always open because we're desperate for help and trying to find those resources for our kids.
Looks like Sandra.
Yeah, my thought was just to try to implement something.
Jill, I apologize. I had muted you, thought we were moving on.
No, okay, it's just to reiterate my point that I would really appreciate something systematic that could, so that CASA and CRB people could be aware of this, and it would just be part of their process to give feedback.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think we can emphasize with our staff to be looking and see if there's CRB or if there's a CASA assigned, if CRB is a part of it, and reaching out and involving in that. I think that's something we forget sometimes or don't think of. And so that's a good reminder we need to be looking as we're doing this family finding and we're interviewing family and we're talking to case team or do this or that CASA is a part of that. And CASA might have some really relevant, some really good information and could really bring a lot of value to that. So we can reach out to our staff and maybe put in there, and maybe we need to put that in. We have some binders that we have for like family finding processes that we could add a step or something, reach out to CASA. Or first, step one, find out if there is a CASA. Step two, reach out to that CASA and get their input and get their involvement.
I'm going to jump in. I realize that this is a new program. I realize also it's a very involved process, and all of that is really good in the targeting of very specific cases that really need that. I guess I have just more a broader thought question, or not really a question, but it seems to me that the whole basic premise and the assumptions in terms of looking at family strengths, identifying family networks, giving families a voice in the cases, that even just that component could be easily adopted into really all the cases.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. You're
It's-
preaching to the choir. I love that. Can you come to some of my trainings and say that?
I'd be glad to, except I talk too much too, so I wouldn't limit myself just to that. But
I agree with you. It's easy. These aren't concepts that you necessarily, it's not like you come in and you have to do all of this or that. It's a mindset to me. It's a,
Right.
how are we going to approach the work we do? Are we really going to respect who we're working with and bring everyone together and communicate and utilize our time wisely on that? You're right. I think a lot of it can be adopted in all of it. It can just become practice of case managers, of kinship, of adoption, and everyone involved.
so to follow that along, then as CRB and even CASA, while we may not expect kind of Jill's suggestion of this kind of standardization of that process, that we should expect that when we're talking with case managers, et cetera, about cases, that these are fair questions to ask.
Yes.
For example, who are not necessarily kinship, but who's a part of this family's network?
Absolutely. Well, and I think the important thing to note is it is part of our job to be looking for connections for kids, regardless of the kid, regardless of the case, regardless of what's going on, that we are supposed to be addressing every month who is connected to this child and who is a positive support in this child's life and this family's life. And so it's not just like a new thing. It's something that should be happening. And it's fair for you all to jump in and say, hey, what's going on here? How are we doing this? Or who's connected to this child? Or what's this kid doing to provide some positivity to their lives?
Yeah, I guess I would also add to that, not only just who's connected to the kid, but looking at families coming from kind of a strengths approach. And I know I was on one of these earlier calls or in services where they were talking about that orientation. And I guess I was very impressed in that session in particular. I think, Sarah, you may have been a part of that. That it was really looking at the families in a different way. And yes, connections for kids are really important, but ultimately it's that larger network and viewing families as becoming more self-sufficient.
Yeah.
And assuming ownership of it. So.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
some of these tools too can be used with parents. Like if we see that parents are struggling in a certain area, or they're the same thing, they have unmet needs of love and anything like that, we can have family meetings for them too and around them and getting them support, because how are we going to get these kids back home to them if it's just them? Like everybody needs a break and mental health time just away and everything. So I agree with that. I also want to make a quick note too that all of the Douglas County kids have a kinship worker assigned to them. So if reach out to the case team, you can ask who it is. Reach out to me, I can tell you as well. Feel free to invite them to all of the CRBs. My team likes to be very involved, so don't be surprised if they do hop on those CRBs, and we'll share information with you if you ask.
Can I ask a question? This is Joan Golden, and I wondered if this new process has been in place long enough to have tracked the success record and impact on a lot of the children that are in foster care. If you're seeing results already.
So it's not like we have at KVC done any specific research or systematic tracking of that. I will say the research behind it is kind of why we were attracted to it, and the effectiveness of connecting those kiddos that Kevin's had in other areas as they've developed this system. I will say we have stories. We could tell you stories of kids who were adopted for one reason or another. They came back into the system, and it's several years have passed now, and we've reconnected with parents, with family successfully, and kiddos have been able to reconnect and go home. And we could tell you individual stories of getting kids connected with former foster parents, or getting kids connected with people who love it. Being able to sit in a room with 10, 20 people and show that kid, look, here's your army of people who care about you. You're not alone. you're not going through this alone, and these people want to be a piece of it. But no, we're trying to work on ways and improve our system to keep track of connections. So like we start the kid, how many connections do they have now? And then we start the family finding process. And as we've kind of got into it, we're doing these family meetings. What have we developed up to? Have we made a difference in that? Are we seeing a difference in timeliness of permanency? Is it helping kids get home? Is it helping stabilize kids, find adoptive homes? We're looking into that, but it's a kind of a process and trying to develop those systems. We don't have a great way yet, but it's kind of informally we do. And I share stories and I bring those up, but it's a lot of, when you're doing this work with the cases I'm talking about, it's being open to changing your expectations and being willing and open for rejection and failure. We get a lot of that, and it's worth it to fail 100 times to get that one situation where it's going to be really positive for those kids. But to answer your question, no, we don't have anything in place to track that at this point.
We have just a couple of minutes left before 1:15. Is there another question? Katie, did you want to ask a question earlier? You're muted now. You're still muted. We love technology. I put her on the spot, so. Let's see if I can ask her to unmute, but I don't know if I can unmute her. Nope.
Okay, let's see.
There we go.
Am I okay now?
Yes, ma'am.
I wondered, I was scrambling to get notes. Is there any way we can get, I know this was recorded, but is there any way we can get some of the basic information from about kinship?
Yeah, I can, if we want to, I can send some information to Heather and she can kind of send that on to you all. I can send you this PowerPoint. I can send you some slides. I have some other material I could send on that kind of explains more in depth that stuff. There's a family finding manual that's pretty long. I'll have to think of a creative way to get that to you because I can't, it's too big to send per email, but it's worth looking at and seeing. We haven't adopted everything about it because it's like 150 pages and it's a lot of in depth, but it's interesting to see the approach and the process on that. And I can send that info on.
Well, maybe it could go to like the CASA off. I'm a CASA. So maybe we could go to the CASA office, a copy or two, and we could check it out from there.
Yeah. And I could also, I could probably find a way to use like my OneDrive or something to have a digital copy somewhere that you could like access via a link or something. Maybe I could talk to KVC about putting it on our website since it's becoming such a big piece of what we're doing. And we could be in some sort of resources. I know we have a resources website on that. So that's a good idea to have that accessible. But yeah, I could drop off a physical copy at the CASA location.
Evan, I think it's a great idea to have it online. We didn't have any attorneys attend today, but there's a whole set of juvenile panel attorneys here that would probably be open to looking at some of the materials. And I'm always looking to include them in training, but unfortunately we didn't have any CLE associated with this. And I didn't even advertise it at this point because of the timing of so many people in vacation, but I can make it available to them too with the judge and the court's permission. And maybe there'll be some follow-up after that.
And we also have offered some opportunities for attorneys and judges too. They have a training where they have a judge from Los Angeles County, because I think sometimes like attorneys and judges like to hear it from their own kind instead of just like some sappy social work like me. And we have offered that, and I can see about seeing if we can get that going again. The hard part is, man, judges and attorneys are so busy. It's just hard getting them and enticing them and bribing them for that. So here's your CLEs and I don't know, a gift card to Starbucks. I don't know.
Sure. And then can I just clarify for purposes of conversations outside of this is a KVC, not a DCF new policy procedure as far as the family finding, or should we expect this if we had transfers of venue from another jurisdiction?
You should. It is a Kansas-wide modality. It is something DCF was kind of at the forefront and started it. So it was DCF and Blue Cross, the MCO, the medical provider, started kind of having conversations with Kevin Campbell. He did some kind of coaching calls with us and did some boot camp, some trainings where he comes in and goes over this. So it should be, every agency in Kansas should be doing some level. Now, each agency might look different how they incorporate it or adapt it into like what they're doing already, but it should be across the board with DCF and everything. And I train DCF folks too. Because I don't know that they have their own, but I'll invite them and I'll have some of them come in so that we're all kind of on the same page of where we're at. And for me, it's not, hey, you have to do this, this, and this. It's here. Let's just change the way we think about the work we do is the biggest piece of it.
Okay, great. Thank you. That'll be helpful as I have a CRB statewide meeting on Thursday. So
Cool.
thank you for that as well. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you to Evan and Sarah for agreeing to provide this training. We started the conversation some months ago when I didn't even know Sarah did the training with Sarah Fry and she was out on maternity leave. So welcome back, and we look forward to looking for more kinship workers on our cases and having those communications and starting to learn the language and shift our perspective.
Thank you.
All right, thanks so much. You all feel free to exit, and CRB volunteers, you still need to email me a takeaway and any follow-up training requests, and we'll touch base. I'll see some of you in an hour or so.